Would you let Jeffrey Epstein watch your kids? Didn't think so. What about his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell? Hard pass. So why trust him? Mark Carney, Maxwell's friend, not yours.
Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show, Take 2. This is that special episode on the Fridays all the way out through the election. 3 months of this. We got sponsored to, is there so much going on? It's a federal election. We don't get them that often. And we need to dig into those issues. Even if you don't want to pay attention to politics through the rest of the year, you should kind of open the eyes and look at this affair more closely during an election campaign period. So, there's lots to cover and lots to talk about, as always. I got a great lineup of guests today. In a little while, I'm going to have Adam Zivo on. He's a freelance columnist for the National Post and a number of other outlets, and he's been very active on a few files, one of which has been the opioid addiction epidemic. It's an ongoing problem, but we're not hearing about it in the election, are we? And we really should. Anybody walking on the streets can see it happening every day. So Adam's going to come on and talk about that. A little after that, we're going to have Sam Cooper on. As I said, my theme today is kind of forgotten election issues, because we're just not hearing about these. They were important a little while ago, but we're just not hearing about it in the campaign. So Sam Cooper is going to speak to us about foreign interference, and then Tracy Wilson of the on firearm rights to talk again. Now, that came up in Justice a little bit recently. She's with the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, but some folks better be paying attention. If those Liberals get in, well, that means that the handgun ban reversal is never going to happen. Your handguns are now going to be, the de facto ban that Trudeau put on them is going to stay. The other bans that just keep expanding and expanding and expanding, that's going to remain under Carney. So it's an issue that is worth bringing up and talking about. So we've been expanding our coverage. We got people all over the place. That reminder too, the Western Standard right now is paywall free. You can see all of the stories, the columns, the editorials, the works without paying. It's free till the end of the election. Sponsors have been fantastic, as have members. If you haven't got a membership yet, they'll still take one out, but you don't need it right now to read the site. So this is a good chance to get a sample and a taste of what we do on there. And one of the more prolific contributors we've had on the site, of course, on our news reporting and such, is Jen Hodgson. And we've sent her off in exile to Eastern Canada so she can cover things over there. And it's been pretty cruel treatment of poor Jen. She had to go to a Carney rally the other night as well, really making her earn her dollars these days. But she's going to check in and let us know how things are looking for her out there in Eastern Canada. It looks like she's scrambling to get her head set up and going out there. She'll be on very shortly. Okay, she's ready to go. So let's see what's happening there. Hello, Jen.
Hey, Cory. How's it going?
Good. You settling in then already out there in the land of the dastardly Easterners?
So far, so good. I just got in late last night. So just working away from my parents' house here and looking forward to getting caught up with you about what's been happening in this election so far.
Yeah, well, you're the reporter. I just blather with my opinions. So what are the top stories standing out for you, Jen?
Right. Well, so we've seen both the Liberal and the Conservative leaders on the campaign trail for the last couple of weeks. And what has really stood out to me is that the Liberals continue to poach Conservative Party policies again and again. So whether it be on crime, like we just saw yesterday, immigration, housing, mining, and even attempting to make it look like, and this is what I think is one of the biggest issues, is the pipeline building. So Carney really speaks out of both sides of his mouth here. So on the one hand, he continues to go along the conservative line, saying, yes, we need more building, we need more energy production, we need the infrastructure, we need to make Canada wealthy, which is all along the lines of what Pierre Poilievre has been saying. But at the same time, Carney is saying that he will refuse to repeal Bill C-69, which of course we know is the No New Pipelines bill. So Carney goes out and has whole press conferences. I personally attended one on Wednesday of this week in Calgary, where he talked about how he plans to make Canada an energy superpower. However, he refuses to explain how he's going to do that, except he implies that he's going to do this through sustainable energy and green energy production, which, of course, we know isn't going to add up to make Canada a global superpower in energy when we have all of this natural oil and gas resources.
Well, the usual word salads. I mean, he's always been a
Yeah.
net zero aficionado. So either he's had an epiphany and he's actually abandoned all that, or he's just saying what he thinks people need to hear to get elected. So you're going to have a good opportunity, though, having been, because that's something that happens, and it's not unique to Carney. Politicians will say much different things when they're at a rally in one part of the country versus at another. So if you get the chance to see some of his events or anything in Ontario through the course of the campaign, you'll be able to contrast that with what you've seen out here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I definitely do intend to attend his events. That's part of the reason why I'm here in Ontario is to go down these campaign trails as much as I can. Of course, within driving distance, but I certainly expect to see both Carney and Poilievre at several rallies and campaign events, press conferences over the course of the next few weeks, and seeing Carney's narrative shifts slightly as he moves from west to east, I think is going to be an amusing one, not least of which during the debates next week, which I will be attending in Montreal in person. So that's the French debate on April the 16th and the English debate on April the 17th. And so seeing what he says in different languages while he's in Quebec, I think is going to be key, because just about the pipelines thing, we know that in Quebec generally opposes the pipelines being built, like vehement opposition to it. I'm not saying everyone in Quebec, because of course there are people that are pro energy, and pro infrastructure in Quebec. However, the government there is right against it. And Carney, when he was there last time, said that he's not going to repeal this bill C-69. So seeing that be a big focus at the debate, I think that that's going to be something to watch. And Poilievre has been clear all along that he actually wants to build those pipelines and he will repeal that legislation. The only other party that said that they would repeal Bill C-69 and related bills like the tanker ban bill, C-48, I believe, is Maxime Bernier and the People's Party. Every other party, the Liberals, the NDP, of course, the Green, the Bloc, of course, because they're in Quebec, all opposes pipelines, doesn't want to see any new pipelines being built, even though the Liberals say that they want to sometimes, like Carney during the leadership debate back in early March. He explicitly said that he wanted to build a pipeline through Quebec. So he just goes back on whatever it is that he says, and he'll just say anything willy-nilly. Like he said that, well, the Thunderstruck AC/DC song, he said, well, this song I grew up to warming up playing hockey when I was a minor hockey player. And at the Western Standard, we looked into that, and that song came out in 1990, I think, when he was like in his 30s or something. And so that's not a huge life-changing statement, but it just goes to show how easily he'll just say whatever comes out at the moment that makes him look good.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting watching the conservative campaign over there as well. I mean, Poilievre's in a tough spot. If the polls are to be believed, I mean, they're in serious trouble, particularly in Ontario. People are going to be watching. Is he going to pivot? Though where would he pivot? I mean, the bottom line is that the Liberals have taken his platform, so it's not like he could pivot to the Liberal platform. He already has it. What can Poilievre try to do over there to try and crack that wall that seems to have gone up for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, Polyev keeps pushing through. He's got huge turnout for his rallies. Like we saw in Edmonton the other night, 15,000 people. In Ontario, his rallies have been maybe between 3,000 and 5,000 people. So significant turnout, but you don't really see much new coming out of his campaign. And I can't say necessarily that that's a positive or a negative thing because he's consistent and that's important. And you know, he's got these slogans which really appeal to people, but sometimes it seems like the slogans might be like what he falls back on because it's quite scripted and there's not a lot of spontaneity there. And you do see Polyev trying to get the votes from both sides. There are some issues that he just won't go there. There are some issues that he stays, liberal light, so to speak. This morning, he said that he's never going to touch the abortion legislation, which is a liberal issue in Canada. Abortion is fully legal right up till birth. And so he's not going to touch that. And maybe some conservative people might take issue with that. Another one is immigration. Polyev says that he wants to increase immigration with housing, but he wants to build a lot of new housing. Ergo, he wants to bring in a lot of immigrants. I think he said between 200 and 250, 250,000 a year.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be difficult. I mean, as you said, he hasn't changed anything. He tends to fall back on slogans, which have been very effective. I mean, as a leader of an opposition, when you're in the parliament and you can zing the prime minister with a slogan, it works out great. But right now, it seems to be backfiring on him. I think for some of us already liked him, it doesn't bother us, but he's just not resonating well with a lot of people, it seems. Uh,
Yeah.
if you've got a few weeks remaining in a campaign, I mean, now's the time to start reconsidering your approach, I would think. I mean, who knows what approach could change, but if you're going to keep doing the same thing, you're probably not going to gain that lost ground. So I got a feeling that, if we see a sudden turnabout and he changes his campaign direction, it is going to happen somewhere in Ontario, Quebec, where it's such a battleground. So at least you'll be there to report on it for us.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Seeing a big turnaround that would certainly give a lot of our viewers some encouragement, I think, because the Conservative Party supporters and the party itself, we've had Conservative MPs come on the Western Standard shows in the last 6 months or so, talking about how guaranteed this win was perceived to be before Carney stepped into the Liberal leadership role. So when Canadians saw that it was a battle between Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre was way ahead in the polls. Like Trudeau's, when he was leading the party, was just so far behind that I think it was Michelle Rumpel Gardner came on one of our shows and said it's 110% that Pierre Poilievre is going to be the next prime minister. And so we see this. We have seen now it's quite a bit less clear, but the conservatives thought that it was a sure thing for a long time. And so they had their approach, they had their slogans, and they had their campaign. But I think a lot of us have been surprised to see actually how well the Liberals have been doing in the polls under Mark Carney. Apparently, a lot of Canadians, liberal minded people, do in fact support Carney. Perhaps it looks like, compared to Trudeau, an adult has walked into the room and, he has this banking history. And it seems that people actually are putting some faith in him. And so that's something that no one really saw coming. And so it's really made for an interesting race, to be sure. And I'm with you that the Conservatives really have to do something other than this slogan mongering to do something different in this campaign and really give supporters what they're looking for. And that is a true conservative perspective. People that vote conservative want conservative values, want a conservative platform. And, speaking of platform, I think something else that the Conservatives could do is officially release a platform. If you go to the Conservative website, and this is the same for the Liberals, the NDP, same thing, the Green Party, they don't have a platform that people can go to their website and see all of the different categories and what that party stands for. And myself, I've written a long form article, a feature article that we continue to update about the parties made from each party. And as I was researching for that article, the only party that posted a platform clearly on their website was the People's Party of Canada. And
Well,
so if you go to their website, you'll see every policy that they have, everything that they stand for, but you don't see that on any other party's website. So if the Conservatives were to make a platform and put it up there for people to see, I think that that would maybe be helpful for people.
perhaps it's time. Okay, well, I'm going to let you go and get on to our next guest. I appreciate you checking in and being there in the belly and the beast out in the east. And we'll check in with you again soon. There's going to be a panel on debate night as well. I'm certain we'll bring you in to discuss some of that. And well, thanks for what you're doing out there.
Sounds great, Cory. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So that is the Western Standard's Jen Hodgson, reporting from out there in Ontario. Again, thank you to our subscribers and sponsors. I'm going to turn to Adam Zivo, who's even more distant than Ontario. He's way the heck out there. And we're going to talk a little bit about something that I'm just not hearing about in this election, even though it was a big issue, and that's the opioid epidemic. It's still going on. It's still killing people. It's still in big debates between the enablement groups and the common sense groups, I like to think. But we're not hearing about it in the election. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, Adam.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So what are you doing out in Serbia?
Well, I'm covering the massive anti-government protests that have been paralyzing the country for the past 4 or 5 months. Essentially, Serbia is run by an autocrat who has a mafia state, and Serbians have finally had enough after 10 years of this. So there was a really tragic collapse of a train station in Novi Sad, the country's second largest city, back in November, and there have been mass protests since. Just last month, 300,000 Serbs marched in the streets of Belgrade, which is 4.5% of the entire country. It's wild here.
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's unimaginable to have that many people come out here, but we've had it very good. I mean, Serbia has been a volatile part of Eastern Europe for 30 years now. Do you think the changes are going to be for the positive in the end?
Well, I would hope so. I don't think, okay, so Serbia economically has been developing, but politically, it's really grim right now. So you essentially have no opposition. Most of the media is controlled by the government. If you're an independent news outlet, you're basically banished from the public realm. You can't get on many television stations. These students are providing an alternative perspective. They're pushing against corruption. They're pushing against the government's mafia associations. If they're able to succeed and put in a new government, I think that would be great. But right now, no one's sure what that's going to look like.
Well, it'd be interesting to see your coverage. I appreciate you being out there. I'll turn it back to kind of what I pulled you in for, though. And again, as I said, I heard you on the radio the other day, too, here out in Calgary. You've been busy, and it's been a big area of your focus has been that opioid epidemic. Why isn't this coming up in the election? It was such a big story for years. People see it on the streets, and we're just not hearing about it now.
Well, I mean, I blame Donald Trump, right? The moment he started talking about tariffs and potentially annexing Canada, it became taboo to acknowledge the fact that Canada is, in some respects, broken. And that's understandable because when you're facing off, against a larger foe that is potentially violating your sovereignty, you're not going to want to criticize your own team, right? But what I would argue is that if we want to protect our sovereignty in the long term, we need to address the fact that many of our domestic policies have failed. There have been 50,000 deaths since 2016 that have been caused by opioids amongst Canadians. Our streets are unsafe. Think about just all of the lost lives and then all of the lost productivity and economic output that is associated with that. Of course, those economic factors are secondary. We should care about people for the sake of their lives first. But when we talk about, protecting Canada, we have to look at it from an economic lens. We talk about, for example, lowering interprovincial trade barriers. Well, what about keeping our cities safe and keeping people alive?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, some people don't seem to understand as well when it comes to the expenditure on potentially for treatment, or even in Alberta, where there's talking about possibly involuntary treatment being applied. But we have to realize we're already paying for this in many ways. I mean, when the police are constantly called, or when emergency responders are constantly called for overdoses, the healthcare costs, we're paying already, and it's not getting better. So, I mean, investing in treatment and rehabilitation can only help.
Of course, and here's the thing: we all know that our healthcare system is somewhat collapsing, and it's very difficult to get, a doctor. We have this proliferation of hallway medicine. Much of that is driven by the fact that you have a small number of people who are very unwell, who are severely addicted to drugs, who are using up a large amount of health resources. You have people who are overdosing and being hospitalized again and again and again, and they're taking up space that could be going towards people who have different kinds of health issues. I have friends who work in medicine. I have friends who are nurses, and they're flabbergasted because they see these addicts, taking up bed space and often being catered to, enabled while they're in hospitals. In BC, there was a big scandal last year where nurses told the media there that they felt unsafe doing their jobs because they were expected to work in environments where they would be exposed to clouds of fentanyl and meth, and they were worried about being assaulted. So there are all these spillover effects, and I'm shocked that this conversation seems to have disappeared from the minds of Canadians, given that it was one of the main issues that we were talking about up until the very end of last year.
Yeah, and after actually, when I heard you on the radio, the host brought on another expert who's used that term, and it gets to me, the loaded one, and saying the problem right now is toxic supply. But they imply almost that addiction is sustainable. If we could just control the consumption of it and give them good pure drugs, they'll be all right, and then they can just live as addicts, carrying on. And it just leads to that enablement handing out more supply, and it's not reducing the addiction, and it's causing a lot of problems. But they won't back off on this.
Well, so it's an underlying problem with how they're trying to reframe all of this, right? So they try to switch from illegal drugs to unregulated drugs with this idea that if you regulate drugs, aka legalize them, everything will be fine. And then they say, oh, the problem is just with toxic drugs. And they are basically implicitly arguing that overdoses are predominantly or only caused by drugs which are adulterated. But that's not the case, right? There is no such thing as, non-toxic opioids, for example. There's no such thing as non-toxic meth. And we know that because the very reason why we have an opioid crisis in North America to begin with is OxyContin, right? So before the late 1990s, we barely, we had a small number of heroin users in North America. That number was fairly stable. But for the most part, opioids were not a huge deal because we didn't prescribe them. And then, of course, Purdue Pharma, an American pharmaceutical company, released OxyContin, which is a very powerful opioid, told everyone it was safe, that it was fine, that it was non-addictive, encouraged overprescribing, and then the opioid crisis ballooned, right? And that was through, legal drugs that came from a regulated source. So these non-toxic drugs, in quotation marks, led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. But these radical activists who claim to be, academics and researchers, they'll say, oh, the problem is with toxic drugs. As long as we just regulated and made it non-toxic, everything would be fine. That there's no evidence behind that, right? They're essentially drug legalization activists who are trying to insert through a back door this agenda that most Canadians don't seem to support.
Yeah, if I take too much pharmaceutical grade fentanyl, it's going to kill me. It doesn't matter how pure or well created that drug was, it's going to kill me. It's a very dangerous drug in a non-clinical environment. So it's a problem with every level of government dealing with it, municipal, provincial, federal. What in this federal election, though, should our candidates be doing to try and move towards a solution?
Well, there's a variety of different ways we can handle this. One main one is, of course, to control the flow of drugs into our systems or into our country. And look, we're never going to be able to fully stop illicit drugs from flowing into Canada, but even preventing just a little bit of supply is helpful because when you decrease supply, prices go up. And then that, of course, disincentivizes use to a certain degree. The demand for drugs is somewhat elastic. If you make drugs more expensive, fewer people will try it. People who are severely addicted will still use it, but of course, we're talking about early on. And so what I would say here, the most obvious solution here is hiring more policing for the Port of Vancouver. So the Port of Vancouver has not had a dedicated police force since 1997. And as a result of that, less than 1% of the cargo that goes through that port is checked for illicit contraband. So it's very easy to get stuff in. Some area mayors say that there's literally no downside for organized crime to set up shop there. Now, to give a comparison, the Port of Seattle, which sees similar shipping volumes and, of course, is in the same area, has similar conditions, has 100 dedicated officers and over 50 support staff. So it shouldn't be that expensive to hire 100, 200 officers to increase the checking of the shipments coming in. But for some reason, we haven't done that, even though we say that, we're a decade into this opioid crisis. And these ports, of course, are under the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. So I think this failure is something that we can very squarely blame on the Liberal government.
So do you think, though, I mean, the Conservatives haven't touched it either. I mean, if this is an area that could be blamed so effectively, why isn't Poilievre trying to make this an issue yet?
To be honest, I'm surprised. I think that they should really be touching upon that more, because I think it's something that people get, right? It's an easy message to say fentanyl and fentanyl precursors are coming through our ports. Our ports are unguarded. Let's hire more staff. So I think that that's a really easy political win that the Conservatives somewhat foolishly didn't take up.
Okay, so I mean, just before I let you go, I mean, the hardest part of all, though, in general, any level of government, you've put a lot of time and work in on this issue. Where do we go with the solutions? It's such a tough one. Like, what are some of the first things we can do, no matter what level of government?
Easiest thing we can do at the federal level is also to impose sentencing reform. So, you have a bleeding heart judiciary, which has been imposing very light sentencing on drug traffickers. So, for example, in BC, for a first-time street-level fentanyl trafficker, the sentencing guideline is around 18 to 36 months, right? Which is obscene because people will sell, enough fentanyl to kill a whole bunch of people, and they'll only get a year and a half to 3 years in prison. And part of that was made possible by a bill that the Liberals put forward back in 2022, which reduced penalties for drug trafficking and increased the use of conditional sentencing, which essentially puts people under house arrest. So what we need is tougher sentencing guidelines, so strict mandatory minimums, which Pierre Poilievre, has obviously advocated for. And I think that would help, right? Because we can't stop drug traffickers if there's no accountability for their actions. You can hire as many police officers as you want. If judges keep releasing traffickers back onto the street with minimal punishment, it doesn't matter.
No, it's a difficult issue. But I mean, I just hope to see it coming up a bit. I mean, there's no better opportunity than when you're in an election to get some commitments from some of these, people running to lead the country. Say, get that down, get it documented so we can get on your case to follow up on it later. So I guess we just got to keep nagging them and hope they make it an issue.
I hope so too. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, before I let you go, I know you're prolific in the National Post. Where else can people find your work, Adam?
Well, you can find me in the Hub, so thehub.ca. You can find me in the Bureau, which is Sam Cooper's Substack. Is excellent. I'd highly recommend that people subscribe to it. You can find me in The Line, which is another popular Substack. And you can also now find me in City Journal, which is a domestic policy publication based out of the U.S. run by the Manhattan Institute.
Right on. Well, I'm going to have Sam on in about 15 minutes, and we're going to talk about foreign interference. So we're all in a bunch of good company today. I'll let you get back to covering that protest. Stay safe out there, and I look forward to your reports from there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. So, yeah, guys, that's Adam Zivo. And also, he didn't mention he's also on X quite a bit. It's always a good spot to find where these things are going and their postings. He's been very good for common sense. He does a lot of coverage on the Ukraine issue. And a very big issue has been with the opioid epidemic. It just frustrates me. It's a huge one. Everybody sees it. You see it when you're going into any urban area. You see it in small town areas, towns with 2,000-3,000 people, and you'll see a few addicts shuffling around. We never saw that when we were younger. It's changed. So Jacqueline asked earlier, one of the commenters, is Jen able to go to Carney's news briefings? I do believe so, yes. We haven't been kicked out of his news briefings. We had some issues prior to the election, but I think we haven't had trouble with access so far. So that much is good. And yeah, Jacqueline also saying the problem is the drug traffickers are using kids so they can't be charged. That's something that drug dealers have done for a long, long time, actually. It's unfortunate. And that's why I guess, investigatively and punitively, you still got to get to that level above them and hit the serious dealers, not the ground level ones. There's no easy solution. That's part of the problem. It's interesting that Adam brought up the beginnings of this whole epidemic, as I said, and yeah, it was the same thing that I used to see. Calgary used to be a few heroin addicts over in the Inglewood area. It used to be really rough over there. Vancouver, East Hastings was always rough for that, but it was nothing like today. I mean, the amount of addicts everywhere is something else, and I saw it in its early stages. What he's talking about with the Oxy. I used to work in the States a lot as a surveyor on energy exploration projects. I was doing one in West Virginia, and that one really drove something home to me and showed some of the problems with. I mean, I'm very much in favor of reforming Canada's health system and getting more private involvement, but it did show the dark side of some of the profit motivated healthcare providers. So I was running a chainsaw clearing a line in some brush out there in West Virginia. And there's some thick, nasty thorns, and a branch came flying back. I was in a t-shirt, I know, safety rules or whatever. I had the rest on. A thorn went into my forearm and drove in deep and then slid right under. Great big long thing. You could feel it under my skin. It was horrible. So I went to see a doctor. I wanted to get this thing removed. I could feel it down there. It's not, a minor sliver, but it's way too deep for me to do anything with. And I go to this clinic in West Virginia, and I wait in the waiting room, and people are coming and going. I finally get in, normal thing. The doctor comes in, the very first thing he asks me, what's your pain level on level 1 to 10? I said, I don't know. It's not bad. 2 or 3, if I'm pressing on it, it'll hurt, but it's not bad. He starts looking around on it and says, well, I can't do anything with that. You'd need an orthopedic surgeon to deal with it and everything. It's beyond my ability in this little clinic. I think, oh God, fine. And then again, he pushes, so what's your pain level 1 to 10 again? I said, no, it's not bad. I'm all right. So fine. And then he moves out. It was as fast as that. We're talking a 5-minute visit. I go back to the waiting room and then back to what the most part of my visit was, which was filling out all, I had insurance as I was working in the United States, but I had to fill out all the forms and everything at this clinic. And again, I'm seeing people just coming and going in there. And then finally it struck me. The guy's a pill pusher. That's it. He's selling the Oxy. And we were already seeing that. I was having trouble with my crews. You'd see it on the streets in the towns in the eastern states. Like, it hadn't hit up here yet. But these guys were flogging that crap. These, people would come in and out. The doctors like him would just write prescriptions without a second thought. They sell half the prescription. They consume the other half, the people who pick it up. And it built that widespread addiction. And then, of course, once Oxy got cracked down on the Americans, and they finally realized that there's some massive lawsuits and everything due to that. Well, addicts are still there. Meth really kind of hit the scene. It'd been around a while, but it got a lot bigger because meth is cheaper, harder to control. It's getting around. And then meth spread to fentanyl, which now, the tiny, tiny effective amount of that drug and how dangerous it is. We see that. If you see that in the streets, if you're not familiar with it, you always see it gives the stoop, right? You see them walking bent over, hunched half over. That's fentanyl. And it's something else. For a procedure I had done last year, I posted pictures of it. I'll spare you guys of it this time around. But that's part of what they gave me fentanyl mixed with something else for that procedure. I guess I was awake through it, but you don't remember a single thing. It just knocks you cold. And afterwards, I came out of it. It felt like I'd had the best sleep I'd ever had in my life. Like, there's part of the problem, too. There is a clinical use for fentanyl. You wouldn't want to have that used repeatedly 2 or 3 days or suddenly you're an addict. And of course you wouldn't want it used without medical supervision because it's a very, very powerful thing. But we haven't had that before. And now, as Joe Mills, a commenter said, it's a sad situation. It is. And it's hitting everybody. And we got some of it we got to stop the taboo. We could look down our noses and you see that addict shuffling around, but don't forget that's a person in there. As much as they might be now a scary person, an in-your-face person, however they fell into that. They also had family, they had parents, they had siblings, and it could happen to anybody. People say, oh, that must have come from a bad household. Not necessarily. This could happen to anybody. So we really, if we want to be a decent country, not just, as Adam mentioned, there's the costs, there's the actual costs. And if you want to be just a cold-hearted fiscal conservative, that's fine. It's still in our favor then to try and find ways to treat this epidemic. And the social and human cost is just overwhelming. And the battles that go on, and that's what Adam's been battling with, and others. There's two schools of thought almost: the enablement thought and the treatment side, right? And I remember an interview I saw. I don't know which TV news channel it was. I watch a lot of the legacy news. I got to get my news from everywhere I can. And they were talking about safe consumption sites in Calgary, and this sob story they gave for this girl who said, I'm perfectly fine. I just want to be safe when I go down to take my pills before I go to work for the day, in case I overdose because I've got illegal opioids or whatever. So I need that center so I can do that. But if as long as I've got that, I'm perfectly fine. And again, that messaging, and that's really what it was as if you could sustain that addiction, as if it's okay just as long as you regulate the dose well enough. That's absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong, and understates the incredible danger of these drugs and the danger of that addiction. And people who don't understand addiction, there's the reason the most successful addiction treatment programs, whether you're talking the classic one I attended, AA, or whether it's other ones, if they aren't 12-step based, it doesn't matter. Most of them have the involvement of former addicts because you need that perspective. You need the perspective of somebody who's actually been there, not some pointy headed professor who's read all their texts in the works. No, somebody who has found themselves ruining their lives, who felt the compulsion, who know that what they're about to consume is not good for them. It's not going to make them happy. It's not going to make their life any better, but they feel they have to consume it anyways. That's what addiction's about. And if a person's never been in those shoes, they can't understand it. Good on them. I envy anybody who doesn't understand that. Somebody who's never felt the sweats, never saw their hands shake a little because they stopped. And that's just on the alcohol level I'm familiar with. But we need to deal with it. It's a weird human trait that we become addicted to these destructive drugs. I mean, a safe supply of meth. You see the addicts too. If you see the ones on the streets and they're skinny as all get out, their teeth are gone, they got sores all over them, those are meth addicts. And they're not harmless. These are people now that they can get meth-induced psychosis. It's a speedy drug. And when they go off their kilter on that, they can become very, very dangerous. That's some of the public transit stabbings you hear about and the assaults. We've got to deal with this. And just filling our jails isn't working. And then people say, and there's the big one with the involuntary treatment, they're really getting on Danielle Smith, and she's trying a treatment-focused approach. Jason Kenney started it first, and she's carried on. And Alberta's had a reduction in overdoses. It is working versus BC that tried enablement, and they just saw thousands and thousands of more overdoses. And I'm not wholly against safe consumption sites. It's just that you've got to have a heavy treatment focus. They should be nagged and pushed and prodded to get treatment every time they come in for that consumption. They got to be pushed towards that. And when you're talking about compassionate intervention is the term used by the Smith government, other people saying incarcerating people for the crime of being an addict. No. When they've hit bottom, look, we don't have many resources as it is. We can barely keep up with healthcare, addiction treatment, and the rest. So the fear mongers are saying Smith's government's just going to come snatching people out of their houses and off the streets and shoving them into jails because they're even if they wanted to do something like that, they would never have the resources. We're talking there's going to be maybe 400 or 500 beds for this. They're only going to take people when they've hit bottom. We're talking ones when there's been a medical professional who's seen the same overdose for the 5th, 6th time, because it's just a matter of time before one of those overdoses is going to be fatal. Or the police officers who have dealt with the same person over and over. Or the again, social workers who have found them literally living in their feces behind a dumpster. Because that's the state of hundreds of people right now. Get them in, get them away from the drugs for a while in a controlled environment, feed them, wash them, and maybe, and it's still a long shot, but maybe at that point, that's where you might be able to get through with a 30-day period to try and say, hey, let's get you treated. Let's go further. Let's get you off this crap. Because if you don't intervene, the chance of success is pretty much zero. Once they've hit that point, they're in a death spiral. It's just a matter of time before they die of exposure or being stabbed by another addict or, of course, an overdose. So people getting on Smith's case, I'm a conservative. I believe in respecting people's individual liberty as much and whenever possible. But I believe in compassionate conservatism. That means we help those who can't help themselves. And when a person is that deep in addiction, they can't help themselves. And it's covered under the Mental Health Act anyways. When a person is looking likely to harm themselves or others, we can intervene. So let's do it. Yet we get these hysteric leftist, enablest weirdos who would say, no, we just need more free drugs for these people, more handing it out, more enablement. God, how ugly does East Hastings have to look before you admit that it's not bloody working? I just don't know. All right, let's go on another sidetrack on something depressing again, but fine. Let's bring up the polls. I'm only bringing up one this week because it's enough, and it's Abacus. Abacus was the poll that was most favorable to the Conservatives all the way through. I mean, they were the slowest to kind of reflect the surge of the Liberals. And now they have the Liberals at a 42% lead and the Conservatives at 36. NDP collapsed down to 11. The momentum for the Liberals continues. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I really don't. But I can't deny it. Denying it, I mean, this could be skewed. It could be that the Liberal lead isn't as high as it looks. It could be that they're actually neck and neck. But there's no way the Conservatives, when you've got every polling company saying pretty much the same thing, there's no way the Conservatives are holding anything close to the lead they did before. They just are not resonating with people. Mavis saying, I don't believe the polls. It's fine. You don't have to, but you can't deny them. They might not be 100% accurate, but we're talking dozens of pollsters now. The same thing. The conspiracy to hold that many pollsters in thrall, it just wouldn't work. Parties do their own internal polling all the time. That's one of the things you constantly do during campaign time. You're running polls. Rest assured, if there was a massive public deviation in support from what these polls are reflecting, the parties would be screaming a heck of a lot more about it. Their internals are showing them the same pattern. And I got a feeling that they're just as flummoxed about it as we are, or as I am. I don't quite wrap my mind around it. I don't see how and what it would take to ignore 9 years of terrible, terrible Liberal government and suddenly change because they put a new face on it. Bumpy Johnson saying this election's a nightmare scenario for the Conservatives. The NDP collapse. It's a two-party race, and a two-party race, the Liberals always win. That's part of it. That's definitely part of it. And the reality was that vote was always split. When the Conservatives would win, when Harper won, I can't remember what he won by, but it was like 42%. They don't win with a large plurality of votes. So that means that the votes outside of their realm added up to more than what they got. So with the NDP out of the picture, the Conservatives are in serious trouble. But part of it, too, is the Conservative support is dropping. It's not staying flat. It's not dropping as fast as the NDP did, but it is dropping. There are still people leaving the Conservatives and supporting the Liberals for some reason. I don't get it. Joe Mills saying polls have never influenced my voting decision. Well, I like to think for most people it shouldn't. But there is a bandwagon effect, and that's another thing, too. And yeah, that's where media's really been pushing these polls, and these pollsters and others have that interest because people just have that nature of they want to be on the winning team. Not everybody. I like to think my audience here is smarter than that, but still, there is some of that. And when you see it rolling like that, people are more inclined to just get on board with what they feel is the majority, get on board with what they feel is trendy. And that's a little bit of what's happening here, too. That's why I was talking a little while back about lawn signs and placement and all that in elections. It doesn't matter on a public street corner where a sign is, but if neighbors, a full cul-de-sac is full of one candidate sign or another, it's going to influence the neighbors a bit. And it's going to keep that trend going. There's another big part that nobody saw coming. Christophe Antoine, commenter, saying, as long as Trump's a monster, people don't want to be associated with the conservative ideology. And that's part of it, too. Absolutely. And Poilievre hasn't shown himself to be tight with Trump or anything, but if people are going to relate one with the other, and there's part of it too, guys, there's not a heck of a lot Trump's done that you could call conservative. He's running a government based on tax increases and collective control. That's not conservative, but it doesn't matter. It's associated as conservative. And he has pissed a lot of people off. And that, if you're associated with him, particularly in Canada, I know there's some people in Alberta love Trump. I know there's some people across Canada that love Trump, but they are a tiny minority. And they are a much smaller minority now than they were 3 months ago before Trump started all this tariff crap and US 51st stuff. He kept giving the middle finger to Canada and pushing things around. I mean, I was getting annoyed by it. I have, and certainly have, we got years of my shows and columns and everything to show, absolutely no use for Trudeau. He's a peckerhead. He's a large part of the reason we're in the mess we're in now. Most of the reason we're in the mess we are right now. But the office, and I'm not a big fan of Confederation. Hey, I wrote the book, The Sovereignist Handbook. But the office of Prime Minister, the office of diplomacy, the way it works country to country and so on, to prod at our Prime Minister, keep calling him governor, and with that America 51st thing and everything, that even was starting to get on my nerves. So if somebody who loves the United States, can't stand Trudeau, is getting annoyed by this, what does it do to the average moderate Canadian? He built a sense of loathing. And then everybody, even slightly fairly or unfairly associated with Trump, starts riding down to the polls with him. And that's hitting Polyev too. There is a perfect storm of a lot of ugliness going on. Well, Bumpy Johnson saying Trump made me money. First time investor in the down part market. Trump has done more for me in less than a year than Canada has done in over a decade. Well, okay. So Trump grabbed a seesaw in the market and started banging it up and down. And some people got lucky and grabbed it on the bottom and rode it up. Does that mean it's a good policy on Trump's part, though? No. I mean, the money came from somewhere. People also took losses, loads of losses. People saying it's a market correction. No, it's not. When it's induced by government policy, it's not a correction, it's a reaction. Both ways. And yes, some people did make some really good money. Some people, if they knew when he was going to do one of his flip-flops and backtracks, they did really well. But that's called, market manipulation. It's called insider trading. I'm tired of people making excuses for Trump. He's not doing North America or the world any favors anymore. I thought he was going to be a better reformer. I was hoping for better. But this bizarre tariff obsession, I know we always campaigned on tariffs, but not this kind of lunacy, this reckless shaking of markets all over the bloody world. And it's eventually going to cost him, especially now that he's taken on China. So, and China is a worthy adversary to take on. They're not nice players on the world stage. But you got to be careful when you're talking about putting now tariffs of 130% against China. Got to remember where the price comes down to, and that comes down to the consumer. And most of the things you get today, where do you think you're going to replace these consumer goods once China's not providing them? Because we're going to take all the manufacturing home. Well, it's not going to be overnight to take cellular manufacturing home, or even manufacturing the cheap consumer goods, the toothbrushes, the pens, you name it. They all are marked in China. You go to a dollar store, one of the Americans, it's part of the American culture. There's a Dollar General every 3 blocks. It's all Chinese goods. Go to Walmart, go to Target. And that's most of Trump's base out there in their pajamas and mid-afternoon shopping. They're going to be pretty upset when the prices double on everything. So, Bumpy's saying, what happens if Trump takes the auto plant jobs from Ontario? They're good jobs. It might be a loss to America now. Yeah, will they, though? Is it going to be that much cheaper? Are they going to retool in the States? It doesn't work that easily. They're integrated markets. What Trump is doing is screwing up the North American auto sector, probably going to drive them into a nightmare scenario. And 5-6 years now, when Trump is gone, the opposite of what he was hoping for is going to happen. Hyundai and BMW and Toyota are really going to take those markets because he really screwed them up here. Jacqueline saying the bigger issue is the issue is bigger than what's being talked about. The EU wants the empire back. Well, the EU, it's another jurisdiction all on its own. And I don't know. And the EU's mostly been getting weaker over the years. More countries are getting uncomfortable with them. They're not holding things together. I mean, that's where the worst of the globalists and the socialists dwell. There's no doubt about that. I don't know if they're that much of a force, though. They're a factor. There's no doubt about that. But how far they're getting with things, I don't know. I'll give some credit to Trump, though. One of the things he came up with, I think that was just today, is he wants to make daylight savings time permanent. There, I can fully get behind that. One of the dumbest of modern day policies we've got that we just can't seem to get out of is changing the stupid clocks twice a year. Okay, Donald, if you could do that, if you could do that, at least you've done one thing I certainly appreciate, and a simple fix. Though I'm not sure if that would be state or federal jurisdiction. Though I know Trump doesn't really care much about jurisdictions. So if anybody's just going to say, hey, it's going to get done and does it, well, he would be the one to get that done, I guess. Joe Mills saying, I was in Jasper recently, stores full of Chinese stuff, didn't buy anything. Yeah, tourist goods, other junk crap, everything else. Most of it's Chinese. But we benefit from some of that. That's what people have to understand as well. We can't bring home these markets again. We're not going to go down to the mom and pop corner store laptop manufacturer. The economies of scale and the size and the frame, particularly when it comes to electronics, is part of what's made a lot of our things affordable now. Think about big screen TVs, these flat TVs. I remember a case, what was it, late 90s or so, when the first of these big LED TVs were coming out, and there was a store in Edmonton got a smash and grab, and this thing was only a 36-inch TV or 40, I don't remember. It was big for the time, though, and it was worth $20,000. Who on earth was buying these things back then? But people did. And now, 38 years later, you can go to Walmart and buy one for $300 that's larger, that's thinner, that's lighter, and gives a better picture. Again, that's not due to domestic manufacturing trends. That's because these things are coming from China. One of my first purchases when I moved to Calgary and got my own apartment when I was like 17 when I first moved, but either way, I remember buying with my first wife. The memories start to fade. I bought a VCR, though, and it was like $230. Back then, that's when you're making like $10 an hour. This is a lot of money on a VCR. I actually bought it on a rent-to-own payment scale. That's what you had to do with those electronics back then. And that's in those dollars back then. I mean, you don't even get VCRs anymore, but if they still existed, you could probably get one for $20. Yeah, Bumpy's saying, I still remember the back-breaking tube TVs. Yeah, that VCR I put on a floor model wooden cabinet style TV that I'd gotten from my parents that they used to have. A huge, heavy, massive, ugly thing. That was the nature of TVs back then. I'm just saying, see, there's a lot of these products we're doing better for as consumers because of it. I'm not saying, again, to bend over to China, but let's not pretend that they're ripping us off when we buy these things. They're making a lot of your average everyday goods affordable when they wouldn't be domestically. I mean, if you want to try and turn the clock back, and that's a bit of what Trump's talking about, into some magical Norman Rockwell 1950s world, fine, but you got to remember that, well, for one, that world's not coming back. But even if you could, people back then, yeah, you only had one person working and so on. You also didn't fly all over the world for vacations like people do now. You didn't have the consumer goods that people have in their households. You didn't have 2 or 3 vehicles in a household. Maybe we are a spoiled society. Maybe we don't need all that stuff. But that stuff has become affordable because of this new intertwined relationships we have with producing countries like India and China. And we're not going to be able to compete with their consumer manufacturing goods. We can't. It's impossible. The labor is much too cheap over there. So, I mean, people say, well, the way to do it is to bring in tariffs against them so that we can do that. Well, okay, but that means you're going to pay more, a lot more. So how much more are you willing to pay? I'm not willing to pay a heck of a lot more. I think integrated economies are a good idea, and conservatives used to think that. The bottom line was freer trade was supposed to be the way to go. Lots of countries all over putting tariffs on, using tariff policy. Yeah, that's because it's been a lazy policy that a lot of countries have used for decades, but it doesn't mean it's a good policy. A lot of countries do a lot of stupid things. So yeah, I'm afraid Sam seems to be running late for some reason. It's unfortunate. Hopefully we can get him on. Sam Cooper was going to talk because the foreign interference factor, that's been one again. That was the biggest news story of the year for a couple of years. And the Liberals managed to just keep ragging the puck and dragging it on and having an inquiry that was sort of inconclusive and then hold another little inquiry that didn't really go anywhere. And now we're into an election and nobody's talking about it anymore. We had 11 people in Parliament identified as being compromised through foreign interference. 11 people. We never did find out who the hell they are. How many of the ones running in this election are compromised? We don't know. We can't know. And we should, but it's not coming up. People aren't talking about it. I think part of it is because particularly the Chinese, and it's fair enough because defenders say, well, also the Russians have interfered and India has interfered. Okay, they're all pissing around in the Canadian realm, probably because we're such wimps we don't identify those who've been compromised. So it just is an invitation for foreign interference. Um, and I was looking forward to Sam because he really gets to the bottom of a lot of the motivation for some of it, especially with China, because he's really, in his book, Willful Blindness, he really broke it down well. Bumpy Johnson saying, I think one of the biggest issues with China's intellectual property theft, Huawei is a prime example for reverse engineering products. Yeah, the Asian manufacturers have always been good at that. It's just been the nature of them, and it's frustrating and it's difficult to stop, whether through corporate espionage or just other ways of getting stuff. We want to reduce it, but it's not going away, and they've already undercut on a lot of those items. But getting back to what Sam was pushing on, with the Chinese interference and the integrated markets in the bad way. The Chinese use of casinos for money laundering, for buying up Canadian properties for money laundering. You see, they're bringing in the money. They're selling the fentanyl. It's coming into North America, European markets. They're producing it. Got to launder that money somewhere, as well as money they're getting from other means. Canada was always a soft touch for that. So they buy up the property that caused a lot of the real estate catastrophe in Vancouver. As well, they were laundering the money in Canadian casinos, and they've got these networks. I mean, there's part of what we get down to, drilling down to, and how complicated and ugly some of it, Sam's stuff and Adam's stuff tie together in a way. When Adam was pointing out the ports, and here's an area that terrifies governments a lot, is dealing with the port. The reason they won't, they're terrified of the Longshoremen's Union. They're terrified of the Teamsters. Those unions have corruption issues. That's nothing new, guys. I mean, look up Jimmy Hoffa. It's been the nature of the Teamsters for a long, long time. And there's a lot of money changing hands on the Vancouver port over there, and the people controlling it are the union heads that are very well compensated to make sure that a whole lot of product gets through without scrutiny. And the government does not want to get into a fight with them. But that leads to this getting worse and worse. We saw how bad it got when the longshoremen went on strike a little while ago, because suddenly we couldn't ship things. We got supply chain issues, and the government scrambled in to intervene and get that thing mediated. They've got the government by the short and curly. So as Adam said, it's mysterious, right? Why can't we just assign a few hundred people? It's not that much cost to be doing security at these ports, checking some of these containers coming in. I mean, if you are, king drug exporter from such and such country, you're trying to get containers full of, and you've got to remember, what a few pounds of fentanyl, is enough to supply a nation for a while. It's unbelievable how potent that stuff is. You've got entire sea cans coming in. And only 1% of them are even checked. If you're an exporter, you send out 10 sea cans, you know that 10 out of 10 are still probably going to get through. You send out 100, only one of them might get checked. Why not send it here? We've got to at least check. It's a needle in a haystack, but you've got to try. As Adam said as well, if you make it harder, you won't get rid of it, but you'll make it more expensive. You'll make it tougher to find, and it makes people less inclined to get into it in the first place. So you won't lose it that way. But these issues tie together in so many ways. And, follow the money in a sense. And then when you get to India, China, they are using Canada kind of as a de facto battleground for criminal enterprises, whether it's with drugs or other means of interference. And we've been letting it go. It's very distressing, to say the least. All right. Let's see. Something. Let's talk about the third party. The NDP collapsed. That led to the Conservative, a lot of the problems that Conservatives are having right now. Jen mentioned Bernier's still there. There's the thing. Bernier has been able to take, but it's one of the things you can do when you're a party that's really not gonna win anything. But at least they can take the stances straight out on stuff that others are afraid to. And he's proposed an immigration freeze to address the housing crisis. This is not extreme. It shouldn't be considered extreme. Bernier is not going to get anywhere, I'm afraid. For the bottom line, the same reason anybody who's even slightly conservative realizes it's bad enough for the Conservatives with the NDP collapsing and all that going to the NDP, but splitting the vote by going PPC is only going to make it worse. I guess if people just want to vote basically purely on principle, fair enough. That's part of the system. Register your vote for the PPC. Absolutely. That's strategic voting is a compromise of one's principles. It's up to the individual. But Bernier is there making points. Bernier was the only one speaking up against supply management. There's another issue that really sends a chill down the back of federal politicians. They're always scared of that one. That's the one where we have paid so many prices. We've lost so many trade deals with Europe, UK, New Zealand, United States, or had difficulties with those deals because of our stupid dairy supply management protectionism. It's nuts. Only Bernier's touched that one. I mean, some people are saying that's the reason he didn't win the Conservative race years ago, which is probably true because he only lost it by 1%. So Bernier is there, and some good people are working really hard running for him. At least, I've said that there's a role for people running for alternative parties. At least you're bringing forward issues, and that's what they're talking about today is forgotten issues. Those parties are bringing them up when the other parties won't. And it doesn't mean they get them brought in, but at least they get them into the spotlight a little. And it's important. It's important. It's part of the role. Jen mentioned that too with some video too. So Polyev has vowed not to touch abortion legislation, which, very strong social conservatives, people with those concerns are going to be upset about. But realistically, they've just never made up a large enough portion that it's going to influence conservative policies that much. But it sounds like the election might take a bit of a turn. This has been kind of interesting this time around. The Liberals haven't done any of the social attacks like they usually do. I shouldn't say none, but not nearly as much. Normally in a federal election like this by now, we would have heard them saying, Pierre's going to ban abortion. Pierre's going to illegalize same-sex marriage. Pierre's going to illegalize black people. You name it. I mean, they will throw every bit of spaghetti at the Conservatives to put them as some sort of backwards people who are going to pull everything back to slavery times. But they haven't done that yet. I think part of it is because they haven't felt they need to. The Conservatives are just that's what I'm talking about too, whether you believe the polls or don't believe the polls. The Liberals are doing their internals. If you're campaigning and it's working with what you've been doing so far and it's working, you'd be foolish to change tactic. So why turn it into an election about race, an election about abortion, an election about same-sex marriage? Because again, it never was an issue in past elections until the Liberals would bring it up and try and smear conservatives with it. But they aren't doing that this time around, which again tells me of their confidence. I think they're still keeping that in their back pocket, but they don't really need to fire those shots right now. Let's see here. Yeah, we're not seeing that happening so much in it. What else we got? Carney. Yeah, here's another one. This one's a big concern. And again, it just doesn't seem to resonate with the voters. And it just tires me out. Carney's talking about pushing for internet censorship. He wants to control the internet. This has been happening since the 90s. I remember laughing my head off at the CRTC, Canadian Radio Television Commission. Towards the end of the 90s, they did a big study. They had a big group because this internet's coming along, and boy, it's spreading information, and we don't have a finger on the control of it. After a few months of spending money and jabbering among themselves, they said, we've decided at this time we're not going to regulate it. And they just laughed. What it told me at that time even was, no, they just don't know how. People with groups like the CRTC, by their very nature, want to control. That's what they do. They want to control information. They want to control what you see. They want to control what you say. They want to control how it gets to you. They want to see everything you do. They're authoritarians, and you should bloody well be afraid of them. The internet's one of the most empowering tools modern society has. And yes, it's also one of the most dangerous tools, one of the most nasty tools. I mean, the internet has also provided for gross child molesting perverts the best pipeline of that kind of material they pursue that they've never had before. But it's also allowed people to share information on a good end, to communicate, to study policies, to get information across to each other. Don't let somebody like Carney control the internet for all of us, ostensibly to go after the perverts. I'm probably phrasing it wrong. It's Penn Jillette, I think, who said it, though. I love Penn Jillette as far as libertarians go. And he said, when something big and bad happens, I think it was mostly in cases of gun control he was talking about, which I will talk to Tracy in a little while about. when something bad happens, the government steps in to take rights away from good people. If there's a mass shooting, the government steps in and steals the gun from the law-abiding gun owners. When this case, it's when the liberals see, people grooming children and doing other nasty acts through the internet, they plan on sneaking in and taking your rights on the internet. And that's not the right approach. You have to be targeted, even if it's tougher. Respecting the rights of the whole is still more important, even though you really do want to crack down and catch that odious minority. You want to hit them, fine. Let's get more tax dollars into officers targeting those sick monsters out there. And let's get real sentencing going on with those guys. Let's get these perverts behind bars for long, long times. You can't cure them. Speaking of not being able to reform somebody, it seems drug rehabilitation at least has some degree of reformation. The recidivism rate for predatory child predators, molesters, is like 50%. You can't fix those guys. They are dangerous. That level is way too high. And I've read studies on that, and it's just a gross world of those people. Something's wrong in their head. Their fuses aren't functioning right. They're attracted to kids. It's gross. It's damaging. It's disgusting. And it has to be addressed, and it's never acceptable. And we can't fix them. Hey, if there was a pill you could give them and bang, all of a sudden their brain's fixed and they're safe on the streets, fine, let them go. I don't want to spend more money keeping them in jail. But the reality is, in the study I read, they started breaking down. Yeah, it's 50% for those ones who snatch up kids they don't know. But did you know that incestual child molestation relationships is only 10% of them reoffend because they're really only into their own kids? Ugh. Okay. Even 10% is too high. Until you guys can start fixing these guys behind bars to get it down to a sub 1% recidivism rate, we're putting our children at risk by letting them out all the time. It's tough. It's tough. We've only got so many prison cells. We've made such a damn mess. Such a mess. Here's one. This is coming up. The Taxpayers Federation brought it up. And I brought this up on my, and I'll have a column coming out on that in the weekend. But the Taxpayers Federation is urging the party leaders to reject a home equity tax. I talked about this the other day, too. And you might, if you weren't viewing that the other day, but the Liberals have been sniffing around your primary residence equity for years. Constantly. They're studying it. They're poking into it. They want a bite out of it. There's no doubt about it. And every time they get caught, no, we're not looking at it. We're not looking at it. Well, why did you spend the money to study it? Oh, I don't know how that happened. And then they do it again. And then they do it again. And they took that Paul Kershaw guy, who's just a Fruit Loop. And he is, as I said, a wealth redistributionist. He wants to take the home equity of people who've built it up over the years and basically have the government seize it and give it to the next generation. But the next generation's getting screwed in a lot of ways. They're having a tough time getting into a house for themselves, building a asset base for themselves. It's much tougher now than it was for us when we were younger. And it was tougher for even us than our parents when it was younger. The markets have changed. But redistributing wealth isn't the way to do it. We need to increase supply. And that gets back to Bernie A being the one who has the knackers to get out there and say, we got to stop immigration so we can have a better housing supply. Look, it's just math, guys. It's just math. We've been bringing in more people than we can house. And then when that happens, what do you think happens? The price goes up in the roof. So yeah, it's good. Ask these guys, corner them. Hey, are you going to put a tax on my home equity? Let's get them on the record. It might not stop them, but it's better get them on the record when they say absolutely no, because right now they just rather not talk about it. Northern Gal saying it's on your tax return. No need to have it on there if they don't want to tax your primary residence. Exactly. That's the frog and water thing, right? That appeared on tax returns, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. It doesn't mean anything, but they're asking you about your private home equity if you sold a home. Why? It's none of their business. Well, because they intend to make it their business. And Joe Mills saying once upon a time they wanted to charge us for the water we take from our own wells. Yeah, and I don't think that's gone either. The wells are registered. They can't, authoritarians can't stand people being free. It bugs them. Bugs them by nature. They can't stand people like me who, I live on an acreage. I got a water well. You guys don't control my water. You can't tell me whether I do or don't fluoridate. You can't tell me how much I'm allowed to use or not allowed to use. It's my own bloody well. I deal with that. They don't like that. But they'll come for it. But housing, if we want to do it again, We need more houses. We need immigrants too. There's no getting around that. But you've got to find the balance, and we've been overdoing it, and that's getting concerning. When Jen was talking too, reporting what some of the latest stuff in Poilievre's platform is talking about, increasing immigration or keeping it at a few 100,000 a year level. I don't know. It sounds a little high to me still. It's important, but we got to be careful. And it's not doing immigrants any favors when you show up in a city and the rent is through the roof and you've got to squash yourselves into a tiny apartment. You're trying to adjust to a new life. You're trying to get used to a new language. You're trying to start a career. You're trying to get rolling. And you're almost bankrupted right off the bat because of the housing costs. We need supply. How are we going to get more supply? Well, yeah, there's one of the big questions. It means you got to get the damn government out of the way because they're almost always the problem. I was in Vancouver. I think it was calculated that for a new condo, just the municipal regulations alone took up $30,000 of it, I think. 30 grand just in paperwork, just municipally. For a condo, for an apartment, we're talking like a 800 square foot little thing down there. 30 grand of it is just to pay the pointy-headed bureaucrats shuffling paper back, forth, up, down in circles. We wonder why we're short of housing? And it adds up. It's cumulative. That's just the municipal. So, throwing an equity tax on top of that, that's not going to help. That's one of the things that goofball from Generation Squeeze that Kershaw was talking about, too. Yeah, he was trying to make the case a while ago. And again, this guy's a consultant to the Liberals. He spoke to them at a cabinet retreat. He was trying to claim that putting a home equity tax on homes would make housing cheaper. What? Only a Liberal can think that way. But, well, don't be surprised with what they think. He doesn't have to reason or rationalize with it. He just says it and people accept it. That's some of the other polling. I didn't get all the numbers out this week for all these different poll pictures because they were too maddening. I mean, some of them showing polls asked who's better set to manage Canada's resource industry, and the majority of Canadians say that the Liberals are. The Liberals have screwed it royally for 10 years, and Canadians still think they're the best ones to manage it. What's the matter with you? I don't know. They're also asked who should take credit for getting rid of the carbon tax. And the majority of Canadians say Carney should. Carney was the architect of the damn thing with Trudeau. Poilievre spent years pushing and hammering on that to get rid of it, and now it's gone, and he doesn't get the credit. Canada, what is the matter with you? And that gets back to what I was talking about with the independence movements and things like that and how they're going to grow. Guys, they are. Because it's one thing you see in all of those maps. It's one of the things you see. Northern Gal's bringing me into this. One of my thoughts of secession should the Liberals win, God forbid. You see that blue chunk, Saskatchewan and Alberta, right in the middle of the country. Very blue. The Liberal numbers have grown a bit in these two provinces, but not by much, because Saskatchewan and Alberta have been pissed on by Liberals for generations. The Liberals have used us as a resource to siphon from, to be dismissed, a colony. And as I said before, people were calming down because they thought, finally, the cycle will turn. We'll get ourselves at least a term or two of Conservatives, and it'll be less bad government for a while, and they reverse some of the Liberal stuff. But no, lo and behold, chop out Trudeau, stick a globalist banker in the front of him, and all of a sudden Ontario's fallen madly in love with him. And we're going to get not only the Liberals back, but with a bigger majority than what they had in the first place. So Northern Gal, you're asking? Yeah, it's going to explode. It's going to explode. People have had it. The only way a country like ours can work with being as large as it is, with having such disparate views. I mean, come on, people from Newfoundland are pretty close to being from a different country, as are people from lower mainland BC, as are people from South Saskatchewan, as are people from Southern Ontario. And Quebec, of course, is Quebec. You have to have a massively decentralized government to allow a great deal of provincial autonomy to try and hold that together. We have the opposite. We have an intrusive federal government. I mean, we have a system that if we followed it would give a lot of provincial rights to provinces, but the governments just don't seem to be following it. So it's not working in the long run. What are we supposed to do? The system's got to change. So how do you change the system? Well, we had Meech Lake and Charlottetown. Those were attempts back in the 90s. Utter failures. Didn't even come close to changing, and they weren't even big changes. So yeah, if the Liberals get in with the majority, you're going to see an explosive in independent sentiment. Now, remember, right now, and it's funny listening to the Laurentian talking heads dismissing it and poo pooing it and talking about it, but we're talking 33% support in Alberta, Saskatchewan for independence right now. That's before the Liberals winning. A third of the people already are saying we want out. What's it going to be the week after? Now, whether that turns into an effective independence movement, though, is a separate question altogether. Just because there's a large base of people who want it doesn't mean we'd achieve it. Independence movements, and I've been involved in them since I was in my 20s. I started the Alberta Independence Party when I was 29. I wrote the book on it, literally. They also have some, I mean, I know people cringe at it, but the term can be applied to some people. Some pretty fringe individuals get involved. It is an unusual movement. And that's fine. Everybody's allowed to have a voice. But the problem is when the fringe ones dominate, they can sour the majority. And when you get a new movement that explodes quickly, and as it will in a few weeks, watch carefully who rises to the top, who becomes the voice of the movement. What are the propositions of the movement? I've locked horns with some people over this because they've put things in saying a new independent Alberta is going to have it entrenched right in there with God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost. Well, then kiss my ass. I don't want a theocracy. I will never participate in a theocracy. And I'm not saying people who strongly believe in Christianity should be dismissed or that their practice is not important. Of course it is. But that's where protecting the freedoms of them to practice it are integral, but keep it the heck out of the government. And if an independence movement is dominated by those sorts of things, it's not going anywhere. Because I'm not alone in wanting to ensure that government stays secular. It's pretty darn important. So we'll see. We got a lot coming, right? And plus, some people could come out of the woodwork. So some brilliant people could show leadership and really take that to the next level. We could maybe existing leaders will change things. One of the things I have a difference with some people on too when it comes to that, and I know it sounds contrary to a guy who started the Alberta Independence Party, I don't feel it has to come from a party. You put independence as a mandate within a party, you turn the party single issue, you lose sight of all the other stuff, and it becomes very difficult to become elected. What the party should do is give citizens the means. Premier Smith spoke along those lines in the sense of saying, when asked about it, that it's in the hands of the voters when the time comes. If a referendum is invoked, that's up to the citizens. Now, Alberta's referendum legislation is garbage. It's impossible to meet the bar, even with a large amount of support for it. You can't get one invoked. It's the numbers are too high. Anybody who believes that petitioning is possible has never petitioned before. Again, look at those numbers in the timelines. You got to get like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of signatures on an official piece of paper with their name, address, home address, by the way, not mailing address, phone number. It has to be legible. It has to be witnessed. You got 90 days to do it. Petitioning is hard. Running an election is going door to door just to get people to sign your petition, your nomination papers to run. It's difficult. You've got to hammer a lot of doors to get, that 100 signatures or whatnot federally, I think it is. And of that, 20% will be disallowed because somebody signed outside the lines or they didn't put the right address or they didn't spell their name legibly. And a lot of people just don't want to give that name. Like if you were a hardcore, really good petitioner, you might get 100 signatures a day. If you've got 90 days to come somehow put together 5, 6, 700,000 signatures to invoke a referendum, how many thousands and thousands of petitioners are you going to need on the ground in that period? It's not going to happen. So the first thing they have to do is get all over Scott Moe and Premier Smith and, just jump on them like a pit bull on a fat kid. Say, that's it. We need this referendum legislation fixed. It takes it out of her hands. It takes it out of Moe's hands. Just fix the legislation. It's still up to voters whether they're going to do anything. Get them on it and get it fixed. Don't put up with it being as it sits. And it also allows the existing government to sort of softly support independence because I know damn well there's a number of MLAs who strongly support it. They're not going to say it in the open, but they're there. I assure you. And they would support it how they can when it's out arm's length in a referendum situation. But when you bring it into the party itself, it gets difficult. Here's Vicky Bayford. I'm glad she's watching and commented because, yes, Vicky is very much independence minded. She's running for the PPC. And she says it's been awesome going to the debates in Yellowhead riding, seeing that people want electoral reform and equalization and transfer payments. It allows me to introduce the idea of independence. See, yes, and that's what I'm talking about. Like when I don't want to fully dismiss people who are running for the I guess you could say fringe parties or side parties in the election because it's still an important role. You're bringing those ideas. She's introducing the idea of independence into these forums that wouldn't have been there if she wasn't running in the first place. She's going to the doors and making those points. I don't think Vicky's under any illusion that she's going to win Yellowhead. Maybe. I don't want to dismiss it, but it's probably really, really unlikely. But it doesn't mean you aren't making progress and making steps. And likewise with independence parties and things like that, they're making a bit of progress. But if you look at the numbers of decades and decades of independence parties that have come and gone, and they rarely register more than a couple of points in an election, even when people are pissed off. The waters get muddied too much on that. So suddenly now you've got, there's one of the challenges we got going on right now. For example, the America 51 idea. Not every independence-minded person is supportive of that. That's not where everybody wants to go. If you get a party that starts, it's an independence party, but they're split and fighting with each other over that, then it's gone. What if they don't agree on a healthcare policy or they don't agree on an education policy? The independence thing gets lost. It has to be simple. It has to be getting a province out of the federation. I mean, that's part of what the whole Clarity Act was about from the 90s, saying that this is the mechanism for a province to go. It has to be voted on in a clear referenda. So advocates have to get that referendum going, and they have to have a clear question. That question has to be simple. Do you want to be within federation or not? Basically like that. Not those exact words, but it has to be like that. Not, do you want to consider independence, maybe being part of the states, maybe be part of 3 provinces? This and that. It's dead. It's dead. It won't work. It won't happen. It's got to be in or out, yes or no. That's step 1. You can worry about the other negotiations afterwards. But if you start muddying it all over the place with all those different scenarios, it's done. It's not going to happen. So figure it out. It's a big rabbit hole. You've opened up talking about that, but it's going to be a real one that a lot of independence-minded people are going to have to organize and think and work on the day after if the Liberals get reelected, because we got a lot of things to worry about. As I was talking about, it looks like my firearms guest is standing me up too, so I'm really pulling a good bunch today. But we are losing our property. We don't have property rights in Canada. That's one of the biggest issues that's made me an independence supporter throughout all these years too. And one of which is firearms. It's property. It's not the right of the government to take it from you, but they're going to, because Pierre Trudeau didn't give us property rights in the Charter. He gave you the right to the enjoyment of property, not the ownership or transfer or possession. No, just the enjoyment. And that means you enjoy it at the pleasure of the government. So that's one issue alone. You can talk about the issues, but when you talk about independence, it has to be a black and white question. And the only thing I'll leave off on that subject as we're talking is you better be ready to know that you're going to win. And here's where I differ with a few of the independence advocates right now too. If you don't think you're going to get a clear win in a referendum, don't go there yet, because you will set it back years. It's not that easy to get a referendum, right? If you come in and 45% vote to go in a referendum, and that's 55 so vote to stay, you're not going to get another kick at that cat for at the minimum 5 years. Minimum. Probably more like 10. So if you really want to go, and I know it's hard when you're frustrated, when you're being abused, when your rights are being abused, but you got to be patient. You got to know when you go to this referendum that you can win it. That means you've got to have your ground game together. You've got to have leaders pushing that concept. So some people are saying we need to get a referendum invoked as soon as possible. Terrible, terrible, terrible mistake. Because there's not nearly the organization, there's not nearly the support for the concept yet to get a winning vote. And if a vote is going to come, Saskatchewan, Alberta, or even Quebec for that matter, it has to be definitively won. The worst thing we could see is 51% to 49%. It should be closer to 60%, because then there's just no getting around it. The majority has spoken. Now we got to move ahead. Timberwolf saying, how do you ease the fear of healthcare change? Yeah, it's a big fear. The other one is and I saw that when touring with Vicky and others with the Alberta Prosperity Project, things like pension plans and others. And we can explain all of those things. You can talk about how people don't need to be fearful of that. But that takes a bunch of time. So if you hold a referendum, say 6 months from now, if you pulled it off, you got it going. And I oppose that referendum, let's say. Like, I wouldn't oppose the referendum. I just think they pulled the trigger too early. But let's say I was, put myself in the shoes of an opponent. All I would do is just sow seeds of doubt everywhere. I would say they're going to crash your pension plan. They're going to crash your healthcare plan. The doctors will leave. They're going to blow up your investments. They're going to do all of these things. And I will spread fear. And I will make sure that people, as much as they'll be frustrated with Federation, will be too fearful to leave it. Which means if you want to win that vote, you got to win those people first. And you got to answer all those questions. And a referendum campaign isn't enough time for it. You need to build that base, and that's going to take you a while. And they're going to have a lot of questions, good ones, bad ones, and different. We're in interesting times, guys. Interesting times. I'm going to finish up mentioning something else that's been happening. People who follow me on X and so on might have seen it. It's interesting. Speaking of First Nations, that's another area in independence areas that really needs a lot of debate and discussion, by the way. I get frustrated. I worked in the oil field for 20 years. I worked in a lot of isolated reserves all over North America, and they're in horrible conditions, most of them. And they're getting worse, most of them. And I thought I would show that. I went out a little less than a month ago out to the Siksika Reserve, and that's one of the better reserves, folks. And they just got billions from Trudeau, literally, $20,000 in the pocket of every single person there. And I showed the housing, which is falling apart. I showed the wild dogs. I showed the garbage. I also covered other things. I showed the cemeteries. I showed the college there that was converted from a residential school. And I talked about part of the reason why the housing is having such a problem is because they don't have property rights like everyone else. They don't own the houses. You don't have an incentive to invest in those houses. You're not building an asset for yourself. And the band is in charge of maintenance, and the bands are terribly, terribly organized. Either way, the video got about 30,000 views. It went fairly viral, but the people in the band got word of it, and they got very, very upset. Very upset. Hundreds and hundreds of comments just going bananas in the scroll. If you look up Cory Morgan on YouTube, you'll find it, and I'd like you to, because I'll tell you what's developed now. The band had delivered to me a couple of notices of being charged with trespassing now because I shot this video. Yeah. And they want to charge me $1,000 on each one of these charges too. $2,000. Now, people not familiar with the geography of that area. Yes, I went on a reserve. And no, it's not illegal to go on one. This reserve has 3 highways through it. Highways. It's not trespassing to drive a damn highway. If you drive from Calgary to Banff, you drive through a reserve. That's the Stony Reserve. You're not trespassing. It's not trespassing to go in the parking lot of a college. It's not trespassing to go to a cemetery that's marked as an Alberta Heritage Site. But they're pissed off at the message I put out. They're furious with that. So now they're charging. And they're trying to shut down the messenger. And that's dangerous territory. They don't want to see the corruption on the reserves. They don't want people to see that. They don't want to see the failure of the reserve system. And it's failing. It's failing them the most. So I've had these charges. And yes, I'm going to fight them. I'm going to fight them. I'm not paying those assholes a nickel. But it's going to take months, and it's going to be drawn out. But one of the things I do want to ask of you guys, and no, I'm not asking for money. Don't worry about that. I am asking that you find my YouTube channel, though, watch that video, and share it. Because I want to show them that the more you try to shut us up on talking about these issues, the more people are going to see it. It's called the Streisand effect on the internet, if people are familiar with that one. Barbara Streisand had a house out in the coast, Santa Barbara area. And some guy who had a website that was obscure had pictures of nice houses all along the coast on a website. This is years ago. And he had like 50 or 100 views of that picture. But somehow Streisand actually found it and realized that her house is on there. And she went bananas and sued this guy for having a picture of her house on his site. And his picture of her house now went from like 500 views to millions and millions and millions of views because Barbara Streisand couldn't leave it alone. If she'd just shut up and let the guy have his site, it wouldn't have been a problem. Now, I'm not expecting millions of views on my video of the reserve, though I think it's an important video to watch. If you've never seen a reserve, give it a watch. Go to the Cory Morgan on YouTube, scroll down. I got a number of videos, but you'll get down to it. It's called a critical tour of the Siksika Reserve. And let's get that thing out there and show these guys. The more you try to shut us up, the more that video is going to be seen. And, well, it's important. I'm going to keep you updated on how that fight goes. I've been talking already with some legal help. It's going to take a long time. It sounds like I've got to fight my way through the band with their BS tickets and fines. And then, of course, they'll find me guilty because it's a little kangaroo court on the Indian Reserve for that. And then I have to appeal it up to another court probably if they want to continue to pursue it. But in the meantime, watch the video, share it with other people. Let's keep showing these guys. And chances are, we might see another tour of another reserve sometime soon out of me. I won't be stopped. Well, yeah, I just see an email from Mr. Cooper. Yes, the time zones got messed up and he didn't quite make it. It's unfortunate. I really want to talk to him. And so I missed a couple of guests. We'll get Sam back for sure. And I appreciate you guys joining me today as I talked it on through those missing guest segments. There was a lot to cover, a lot of things to talk about. I'll be back on Wednesday. Don't forget the Western Standard right now is free. There's no paywall up. Another sponsor, by the way. Hey, look at the numbers of gold just this last week. I think the other day it gained like 5% in a day. New World Precious Metals. They provide services right here in Alberta. They're local. You want to get some money in precious metals, these are the guys to do it. If you didn't, they've been advertising with us for a couple of months now. If you'd have gotten on with them a few months ago, I think you already would have seen something like a 30% gain or something. I don't quote me on that, but it's been going up like crazy. Get into these metals, guys. The currencies in this crazy show in the world right now are not doing anybody any favors. Check out that sponsor. Get on the site. It's free to read here at the Western Standard for the next while. Watch Nigel's show. Watch Jen from Ontario, and be sure to tune in with me on Wednesday for my regular show. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you next week.